From CGTN headquarters in Beijing, this is The Hub with Wang Guan.
Hello and welcome to the program. I'm Wang Guan in Beijing. It has been more than 5 months since Hamas's attack on Israel on October the 7th and the subsequent Israeli offensive on Gaza. But there's some hope that truce efforts are now picking up pace. Mediators have met in Paris, France last Friday to negotiate a potential deal for a pause in the fighting in Gaza. But the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said on Sunday that Israeli forces would push into Rafah for total victory, regardless of whether a ceasefire deal could be reached. Despite all that, Israeli negotiators are set to travel to Doha, Qatar in the coming days to continue discussions on a captive release and truce agreement. Meanwhile, Palestinian news agency Rafah says President Mahmoud Abbas has accepted the resignation of his Prime Minister Mahmoud Shattaya's government. They will continue their duties until a new government is formed. Meanwhile, Associated Press journalist David Bieber has more from Jerusalem.
This mass resignation is aimed at paving the way towards a shakeup in the PA. It also shows that the PA wants a role in running post-war Gaza. That's also what Washington wants. Now, we don't know yet who is going to be picked as the replacement prime minister, but the expected choice is Mohammed Mustafa. This is a man who has held key leadership positions in the PA. He is currently the senior economic advisor to President Abbas. He also runs the Palestinian Investment Fund. Most interestingly, perhaps, he worked for the World Bank in Washington for more than 15 years. So he is a known quantity there. He is a technocrat. But there could be huge obstacles. Namely, we don't know if Hamas or Israel would want to work with him. The Palestinian Authority is very unpopular among Palestinians, and President Abbas isn't going anywhere yet. So, you know, it would be a limited shakeup, at least, let's say, and you know, it could be a step in the right direction, but perhaps not enough. Right. So today we had exchanges of attacks between Israel and Hezbollah. It started with Hezbollah downing an Israeli drone that was flying over Lebanon. Later, Israeli fighter jets targeted Hezbollah targets deep inside Lebanon, the deepest yet, or among the deepest yet, since the war in Hamas began, killing at least 2 Hezbollah members. Hezbollah retaliated with 60 rockets aimed at the Golan Heights, and Israel then retaliated back. Went after the launch site as well as another Hezbollah member who was targeted and killed. So, you know, this really reflects the heightened tensions in northern Israel on the border, and Hezbollah has been saying that it could end these near-daily attacks if there were a ceasefire in Gaza. Israel, on the other hand, has said that these attacks will only continue, and in fact, Defense Minister Yoav Gallant said that they will escalate attacks even if there is a ceasefire. David Biller with the Associated Press for CGTN in Jerusalem.
Now, to take stock of the Israeli-Gaza conflict, I'm pleased to be joined in Guangzhou by Ebrahim Hashem, an Emirati strategist and Asia Global Fellow at Hong Kong University's Asia Global Institute. In Shanghai, we have Josef Gregory Mahoney, Professor of Politics at East China Normal University. In Beijing, we have Zhou Rong, Senior Analyst from the Chongyang Institute for Financial Studies at Renmin University. And also in Xi'an, we have Wang Jin, Associate Professor from the Institute of Middle East Studies at Northwest University. Now, Ebrahim, let me go to you first. There's so many new developments in the Middle East for us to decipher and to make sense of. This resignation of the Prime Minister of the Palestinian Authority. Reportedly, Mahmoud Abbas, the President of the Palestinian Authority, has accepted that resignation. And also, we have a potential truce deal. Finally, a truce deal potentially, whereby parties involved are meeting in Paris. We have, for example, the Israeli National Security Advisor suggesting on Saturday that an agreement might be possible. And also we have Haaretz media citing a foreign diplomat saying that Israeli media reported significant progress where all parties are showing flexibility. Ebrahim, do you think, first of all, a ceasefire can be reached before the holy month of Ramadan, that is in about 2 weeks from now? What is the prospect here?
It's possible, as long as there is pressure on the Israeli government. I'm not sure whether there will be a permanent ceasefire agreement, because some hours ago, we got the news that there's an agreement that there will be a release of hostages, a woman and elderly, released by Hamas and other militia groups in Palestine, in Gaza. And in exchange for that, there will be a release of around 400 Palestinians held in prisons by the Israeli forces. It's possible, but without pressure from the international community, without pressure from the U.S. administration on the Israeli government, I'm not sure whether it's going to be persisting, because also recently, not too long ago, the current Prime Minister of Israel said, regardless of the outcome of these agreements or these negotiations, we will continue our operations until we achieve all our goals. And these goals, so far, we haven't actually seen them achieved by any measure. So it's a very complicated situation. We hope, of course, that this agreement will persist and that ceasefire will be implemented.
Yeah, Ibrahim, we know that the Palestinian Authority have long had this intricate, complex relationship with Hamas, which is considered a more extremist faction of the Palestinians. What do you make of the fact that the Prime Minister of the Palestinian Authority submitted the resignation and reportedly President Mahmoud Abbas accepted it? Why now?
Well, whoever is going to eventually manage Gaza and manage the West Bank, that will be a decision to be made by the Palestinians themselves. So the external powers or the external players, they should not really interfere in the internal matters of the Palestinians. As long as there's an agreement between the Palestinians, the PLO, the current Palestinian government in the West Bank, and the other factions in Gaza, including Hamas, as long as there is an agreement among these different parties, there's a unified government in Gaza and West Bank. That is their business, and that will have to be decided by them.
Mr. Zhou Rong, let me turn to you here in Beijing. Do you think a meaningful and verifiable ceasefire can be reached anytime soon, given the latest developments in Paris and elsewhere?
I think thank you for having me. Let me answer the question this way. I think the temporary ceasefire may be reached very soon because Israel itself were inflicted a heavy loss during their ground attack against Gaza. But on the other way, the permanent ceasefire cannot be reached very soon because Israel's goal is to wipe out Hamas or expel all of them out of Gaza. So it is very difficult to reach such agreement. And also, America cannot abandon its policy supporting Israel against Palestine. So right now, the temporary ceasefire can only reach one goal, that's relax the humanitarian disaster for a short time. But after that, I think right now that Israel will be ready for the new attack, underground attack in Gaza area. They will not stop that. That is Netanyahu's policy and their final goals.
The final goal of what?
Final goal is wiping out the Hamas. They will, because the agreement is not, I think the four sides without the Palestinian authority in West Bank. So that is to say only Hamas, Egypt, and Israel, Qatar, as well as the United States reach agreement. So that would be say that must be the short one, the temporary one, cannot be the final one, because without Palestinian authority joining in, any kind of agreement will be a short one.
All right, Professor Mahoney, we've heard from Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu pushing his hard line, saying that the Israeli troops will move into Rafah regardless of what happens on the negotiating table. And he also said that in a post-war plan, Israel will take over civilian and security aspects of Gaza. What do you think will happen next?
Well, I'm not optimistic that we've yet seen a true change of heart in Tel Aviv, so I agree with my colleagues. Perhaps we're simply seeing some PR games by the Israelis to buy more time as their allies or vital trading partners experience increasing discomfort. For example, I was speaking with a Turkish political activist a few days ago who described increasing tensions in Istanbul. On the one hand, Turkey is publicly empathizing with the Palestinian people while reportedly still selling oil and military equipment to Israel and still buying advanced weapons from Israel. So Turkey's not the only country that's facing pressure, and this pressure is certainly understood in Tel Aviv. Now, it might be the case that Israel will try to exploit the possibility of the ceasefire as a means for extracting concessions from different players, and then if one's brokered, even if it's short term, hyping it as an indicator of their humanity. So while one might be coming, while a short term one might be coming, and certainly is desperately needed and should be encouraged, one should also wonder at what price. As for what comes next in Gaza, one of the things that we haven't talked about is after assuming that Israel is capable of eradicating Hamas, which I don't think many people think that that's a realistic objective, then there are other groups that they have to contend with, like Islamic Jihad, that they also would like to eradicate. So how far would it go? How long would they need to occupy? What sort of presence? All of these remain open questions.
Yeah, there are so many structural issues in play. Professor Wang Jin, let me turn to you. Talking about China's role, China has been calling for a ceasefire. It has been walking a thin line, has been playing this delicate balancing act, supporting the humanitarian causes of the Palestinians while, heeding the concerns of Israel as well. What do you think China has done, and what role do you think China will play when it comes to a path to ceasefire?
I think China has already done a very, very important, active, constructive role, and will continue to do this role in the future. Because we know that on the one hand, China tried to create the kind of the atmosphere for the international community to facilitate and encourage peace. Because we know that, for example, last November, China, as the rotating chair of the United Nations Security Council, China tried to encourage and facilitate the path of the resolution of the very first resolution of the United Nations Security Council over the latest round of Israeli-Palestinian conflict. So actually, China tries to do our best. And on the other hand, China, on many occasions, tried to repeat and retaliate the very, very important principle of the future peace between Israel and Palestinians. That is the two-state solution. Because during the past weeks, especially the past 1 week, a lot of the very noise. They trying to speak out, for example, that we should forget about the so-called two-state solution. We should forget about the independence of the Palestinian nation state. That is very dangerous news and dangerous signals for the future peace between Israel and Palestinians. So on many occasions, China repeatedly called for the international community to respect and insist the principle of the two-state solution. I think that is why China contributes a lot, and also will continue to do our best to help and facilitate the peace process between Israel and Palestinians, try to encourage the peace come back as early as possible. Wang Guan.
Yeah, talking about the multilateral approach, we know where the problem lies, at least some of us. Ebrahim, the United Nations Security Council has proposed multiple rounds of resolutions and proposals calling for an immediate ceasefire, but those proposals and resolutions were voted down by a country, and then we're going to name the name, that is the United States of America. How do you feel about that, and why do you think that's the case?
One major part of the reason why this issue has not been resolved since 1948 is because a lot of people regionally and also globally, the foreign powers, especially the United States and some other Western powers, view the issue not as, between two peoples, the Israelis and the Palestinians. Some people, some policy makers, some politicians in the West view Israel, view Palestine as an extension of their power in the world, as an extension of their influence in the region and in the world. For some of these people, they see Ukraine, Palestine, and Taiwan as the three pillars of their global hegemony. If it was only, an issue to be resolved between two peoples, the Israelis and the Palestinians, the law is clear, the UN Charter is clear, the UN resolutions are clear. They are basically saying just have a peace, give the Palestinians a state of their own based on the 1967 borders with East Jerusalem as the capital of this state, the Palestinian state. But because there are a lot of regional implications and global implications, we are not really able to resolve this question, the question of Palestine. As far as the vetoes, the three vetoes used by the U.S. Since the 7th of October, basically, U.S. in the region has lost a lot of influence and a lot of credibility. Now, the Arab countries and also some Muslim countries are trying to re-internationalize the question of Palestine. As you know, since the 1990s, the U.S. has monopolized the peace negotiation process. Although in the 90s and early 2000s, there was a quartet established, United States, European Union, and Russia, established to really just bring an end to this long-standing issue, the question of Palestine. But the U.S. monopolized this process, and as a result, the Palestinians did not really get their rights. During the Oslo Accords, or as part of the Oslo negotiations, the Palestinians were actually promised to have land for peace. So you just give us peace. We ensure that the Israeli society or Israel will be secure, and in return, the Palestinians will get their land back. But that did not really happen. On the contrary, the Israeli government since the 90s have actually increased the settlements in West Bank. Now we have more than 700,000 settlers, around 400 in West Bank and around 250 in East Jerusalem. And that is going to be further complicating the question of Palestine. But in my opinion, the recent events, especially since October 7, and also especially since the decision to actually take the case to the International Court of Justice, there's a lot of attention being paid to this issue. It's not only political issue now; it's a humanitarian issue. And in my opinion, I'm very hopeful that within maybe 10 years. Maximum 20 years, this question hopefully will be addressed.
Right. Let's talk about the Israeli situation here. Mr. Zhou, Israeli opposition leader Yair Lapid criticized the Israeli police forces' response to protests against Netanyahu's government. What do you think this will mean for Netanyahu's political future? Because we know that Netanyahu has generated quite a bit of controversy since not only the start of his current tenure, but previously too.
Thank you. For Netanyahu, I think the only thing for him to do is continue his war, because once the war suddenly stopped and his political future is finished, he may have no future. Because for Netanyahu, the peace is very meaningful meaningless for him. For him, the only thing he launched one war on Gaza. If he can just get United States involved in and to maybe launch another small skirmish or even sometimes low-level attack on Hezbollah and even Syria, even get Iran involved in that, make it split over the whole Middle East region. Maybe that's his purpose. But I think his participation is much over than his ability. I don't really think he will reach his aim. And he got a lot of pressures, not only from the rest of the world, but also from his ally, America, also forced him to stop the war, though America does not openly telling openly support Israel. Not openly saying that they will just ask Israel to stop the war, but in a lot of private diplomacy, Blinken and a lot of American diplomats, American officials, just try to convince Israel they will not be able to wipe out Hamas, not be able to achieve the goal. But Netanyahu is such person who will not listen to any kind of advices or pressures from the outside. He will continue his war. But for some of the tactics, he may change some, adjust some of his policy, try to adapt itself to some of the pressure. He will not change his policy. I cannot see in the near future he has any kind of real adjustment on his policy towards the Palestinian people. He will not do that. Thank you.
Oh, yeah, thanks for this analysis. Professor Wang Jin, the Prime Minister, or should I say the outgoing Prime Minister of the Palestinian Authority, Mahmoud Shataya, tendered his resignation as we talked about previously. He cited internal challenges and the toll of conflict with Israel as reasons why he's submitting the resignation now. What political structure is likely to administer a post-war Palestinian state?
I think it's meaning a new beginning, because actually we have to know that inside the structure, political structure, the Palestinian Authority, Prime Minister is important, but not that much. The very foundation role played inside the Palestinian Authority is the president, is Mahmoud Abbas himself. So Mahmoud Abbas is the most important figure, and the Prime Minister actually during the past decades changed several times, and every time there comes an important figure, but actually the very political determinational voice was played by Mahmoud Abbas, the president himself. So actually the resignation of Prime Minister on the one hand might reflect the very growing dissatisfaction of the Palestinian people in the West Bank, because the Palestinian people in the West Bank, they hope the Palestinian Authority led by the Fatah to do something to change that what is happening in the Gaza Strip, to influence the war. But on the other hand, we have to know that it also might come from the pressure of the United States, because the United States hope that the Palestinian Authority to be reformed into the new authority, to be ready for the future political structure in the Gaza Strip, to govern the Gaza Strip like what happened before 2007, before the Fatah and the Hamas internal war that year. So that is why I think it is a very new, maybe the new time, that because the Palestinian Authority led by Fatah is preparing for re-govern the Gaza Strip, but that we have to know that there is one condition for that would happen, because that precondition is that the out of power, the very so-called elimination of the Hamas in the Gaza Strip. But if we look at what is happening now in the Gaza Strip, I don't think that would happen. Wang Guan.
All right, Joseph, let me turn to you. There's an election going on, that is the U.S. presidential election. In the primaries of the GOP, Donald Trump is going very strong, beating Nikki Haley in South Carolina these days on her home turf. And he's widely speculated to be the nominee for the GOP going forward, and even potentially having this very strong showing against Joe Biden in November matchup. What do you think when it comes to military aid to countries like Israel and Ukraine? How will that change? Because Donald Trump boasts himself as having, the utmost support to Israel, given his relations with Israel, with Bibi himself, and also his son-in-law Jared Kushner, their personal ties with Israel.
Well, first, Biden's so politically invested in defeating Russia that he seems unlikely to consider negotiations until after the election, while some Republicans continue to press allegations of a Biden-Ukraine corruption scandal and calling for the end of U.S. aid to Kiev. Second, some suspect Netanyahu is still pressing in Gaza, not simply because of his own strategic goals, which I think is certainly the case, but also because it harms Biden's re-election chances, with reports that Israel's conservative politicians prefer a Trump presidency. And of course, Trump has indicated already that he may take the fight more directly to Tehran, which Netanyahu wants. Now, both conflicts are hurting Biden. The war in Ukraine is essentially over, despite continued fighting, effectively stalemated for more than a year, while Biden's support for Israel is turning a relatively small but important group of Democrats and independents against him in an era when intense polarization and slim margins mean every vote counts.
Yeah, it's all about turnout, and let's see which candidate will rally the crowd better. Ebrahim, the last question goes to you, if you don't mind. The United Nations Secretary General Antonio Guterres has warned that a full-scale Israeli operation in Rafah could severely harm Gaza's aid programs, humanitarian situation over there. What could be the consequences of such an operation?
The Egyptians are really very concerned about any military action in Rafah. We already know that there are around 2 million people already in Rafah. They have been actually displaced from northern parts of Gaza, and the humanitarian situation is really, really dire. And if the Israelis decide to go into Rafah and really just carry out this military operation, there will be more people dying, and this is not going to be acceptable by anybody. And the Egyptians are really concerned because they are. Some Egyptians are saying maybe this is a plan to really just go into Rafah and really just open some holes in the wall created between Rafah and Egypt, and then use that as an excuse to really displace the Palestinians into Sinai. And this is a really a red line, a big red line for the Egyptians, and they are really watching the situation very, very carefully. So hopefully this is not going to happen. And the news that coming out of the negotiations between the two sides, agreeing on a temporary ceasefire, hopefully is going to persist and is going to be implemented. And as a result, hopefully we'll be avoiding a catastrophic situation in Rafah.
Yeah, Professor Zhou Rong, we have about 1 minute left. Considering the situation right now, Israel's conflicts with Lebanon on one hand and Israel's offensive in Gaza, is Israel heading towards a full-scale war with Lebanon in the north? And what do you think will be the spillover effect of conflicts in the Middle East region?
I don't really think Israel will launch a full-scale war against Lebanon. Israel only wanted more country to be involved. Israel wanted to be a victim of the war, not to be the aggressor of the war. I would like to add one point on the Ukraine and Israel. And for United States, they can support Ukraine more or less. For Israel, they must support full time. They cannot give less aid to Israel because Israel is more important than Ukraine for American strategic interest.
Very good, very good. Well, we'll see how elections in the U.S. shape up, and we're also praying that humanitarian aid will reach those in need in Gaza and elsewhere in the Middle East, and peace will be reached soon. On that note, thank you for watching this episode of The Hub on CGTN. Our news continues. Bye and take care.